Definitely a sweeping one.
It is colossal, maybe even audacious. We're going to try and synthesize the cosmos, biological life, and human consciousness into one single unified system.
That is the mission. We're looking at a huge theoretical framework that basically says the entire universe is one self-regulating organism.
A single cybernetic system.
Exactly. And to do that, you have to integrate three massive fields. First, astrocybernetics. That's the cosmic flows, the physics of it all.
Right.
Then you have biocybernetics, which is the structure of life itself. And finally, and maybe most importantly, quantum psychocybernetics.
Which defines the role of the mind, the observer.
The critical role of the observer's mind, yes.
Okay, so let's unpack that. The goal here isn't just to describe these things next to each other, but to get at the physical why behind self-organization.
The why behind autopoiesis.
Autopoiesis. That's the cybernetic term for a system's ability to, what? Regenerate itself. Maintain its own identity.
Precisely. And in doing that, this whole theory forces you into a really radical shift. Philosophically, but also physically.
How so?
We're essentially flipping the script on one of the most fundamental laws of physics, the second law of thermodynamics.
Which says everything is always moving toward decay and disorder. Entropy.
That's the one. Instead of seeing the universe as something that started perfectly ordered and is just, winding down toward heat death.
This theory says order is the norm, and decay is the thing that happens when that order fails.
Yes. The core idea is that entropy, this disorder, isn't the baseline. It's the decay state that happens after a system has already successfully organized itself and then, for some reason, failed to maintain that order.
So the universe isn't just running out of steam.
Not at all. It's constantly spending energy to create and maintain these highly specific local pockets of order. The cosmos, life, consciousness, they're all fundamentally autopoietic, self-making things.
Okay, but for any kind of universal self-correcting system, which is what you're saying the universe is, it needs a medium, right? Information has to travel through something.
It can't happen in a vacuum, no. You absolutely need a medium.
So what is it? What's the substance that lets the universe regulate itself?
And that brings us to the conceptual bedrock of this whole thing. It's called the phase-shifting universal morphonic oceanic wave theory.
That's a mouthful.
It is. So we'll just call it PSUMOT. It's basically an updated, physically concrete identity for the old idea of the ether.
The stuff Newton and others thought filled all of space to explain gravity.
Exactly. PSUMOT defines this medium as a quantum superfluid substrate. It permeates absolutely everything, and it's the information-bearing carrier that links it all together, from cosmic dynamics all the way down to human thought.
So we're not in a cold clockwork universe. We're in a vast, conscious, and dynamically self-correcting ocean.
That's the stage we've set.
All right, let's dive in, starting at the cosmic scale. If the universe is this massive ocean of quantum superfluid, this PSUMOT, then it should have answers for some of cosmology's biggest mysteries.
It should.
So let's start with the big one. How does it unify dark matter and dark energy?
What's so fascinating here is just how elegant the solution is. PSUMOT says dark matter and dark energy are not two separate weird things.
Which is how the standard model treats them.
Right. Instead, they are two different but fundamentally inseparable manifestations of the exact same thing.
The superfluid itself.
The superfluid itself.
So dark matter is the stuff, the actual substance of the ocean.
Exactly. Dark matter is the quantum superfluid substrate. It fills every corner of space. It has mass, so it interacts gravitationally, but not with light, which is exactly what we observe. It's the medium.
And if that's the substance, then dark energy.
Yeah.
Don't tell me it's just the motion of that substance.
That is the key insight. Dark energy is just the large-scale flow, the universal current of that quantum superfluid. This continuous outward flow creates a uniform negative pressure across the whole cosmos.
Which is what you need to explain why the universe's expansion is accelerating.
Precisely.
This definition seems to, almost instantly solve one of the most frustrating problems in cosmology.
Yeah.
The coincidence problem.
It really does.
Can you explain for our listeners why that problem is such a headache?
Sure. The coincidence problem is this. Right now, today, in this cosmic moment, the amount of dark matter and dark energy in the universe are roughly comparable. They're on the same order of magnitude.
Duh.
But the standard model, which says they're totally different things, has no good reason for why that should be true right now. It looks like a 1 in a trillion random coincidence. Why aren't their densities orders of magnitude apart?
It's a huge just because in physics.
A huge one. But PSUMOT just cuts that Gordian knot completely.
How?
Well, if dark matter is the substance and dark energy is the flow of that substance,
Then of course they're related.
of course, they're substance and motion of the same thing. Their comparable densities are not a coincidence at all. It's a predictable, necessary outcome of the system's dynamics. You can't have a river without water, and you can't have water without the potential for flow.
Yeah, this makes so much sense. But if dark energy is the river flowing, that completely changes how we think about gravity. You're throwing out general relativity's idea of gravity as warped spacetime. That's a massive claim.
It is a massive claim, and the theory handles it by redefining gravity not as a fundamental force, but as an emergent, effective force.
Emergent, like friction or drag.
Exactly like drag in classical fluid dynamics. It's not fundamental, it's a result of other interactions.
So how does the drag mechanism work?
You have to think of ordinary matter, stars, planets, galaxies, as impurities or obstacles inside this universal current.
Like rocks in a river.
Perfect analogy. Like rocks in a river causing turbulence and slowing down the current locally.
And that creates the effect we call gravity.
Yes. These obstacles create drag in the superfluid flow, and that disruption creates a pressure gradient, a pressure difference.
And things naturally move from high pressure to low pressure.
Right. So what we perceive as gravitational attraction is actually matter being pushed toward the lower pressure region that forms behind the massive obstacle. We're not being pulled, we're being pushed.
So gravity is basically an acoustic phenomenon governed by fluid dynamics.
In this framework, yes.
Well, if that's true, it has to account for some of the really weird cosmic anomalies we've found. The thing
Without water, and you can't have water without the potential for flow.
Yeah, this makes so much sense. But if dark energy is the river flowing, that completely changes how we think about gravity. You're throwing out general relativity's idea of gravity as warped spacetime. That's a massive claim.
It is a massive claim, and the theory handles it by redefining gravity not as a fundamental force, but as an emergent, effective force.
Emergent, like friction or drag.
Exactly like drag in classical fluid dynamics. It's not fundamental, it's a result of other interactions.
So how does the drag mechanism work?
You have to think of ordinary matter, stars, planets, galaxies, as impurities or obstacles inside this universal current.
Like rocks in a river.
Perfect analogy. Like rocks in a river causing turbulence and slowing down the current locally.
And that creates the effect we call gravity.
Yes. These obstacles create a localized disruption, or drag, in the superfluid flow, and that disruption creates a pressure gradient, a pressure difference.
And things naturally move from high pressure to low pressure.
Right. So what we perceive as gravitational attraction is actually matter being pushed toward the lower pressure region that forms behind the massive obstacle. We're not being pulled, we're being pushed.
So gravity is basically an acoustic phenomenon governed by fluid dynamics.
In this framework, yes.
Well, if that's true, it has to account for some of the really weird cosmic anomalies we've found. The things standard models can't quite explain. Let's start with the biggest one, the Great Attractor.
The Great Attractor is a classic mystery. It's this huge, diffuse, supermassive region of space, and it's pulling our entire local group of galaxies, including us, at hundreds of kilometers a second. It's a massive velocity anomaly.
And in standard gravity, you need a gigantic, unseen concentration of mass to explain that pull, which really strains the models.
It does. A structure like that is not just possible, it's predicted. It must exist. Because if matter creates drag in a universal flow, then an enormous concentration of mass would act like a colossal obstacle.
The ultimate rock in the river.
The ultimate rock, a cosmic sinkhole. It creates this huge funnel of intense drag and pressure disruption in the superfluid, and that generates macro-level turbulence that pulls everything in its vicinity into its current. It's just fluid dynamics on a galactic scale.
And this idea of a non-uniform, turbulent flow that also offers a solution for the Hubble tension.
Right, it does. And the Hubble tension is one of the biggest crises in cosmology right now.
Remind us what it is.
We have two very precise ways of measuring how fast the universe is expanding. One method looks at the early universe, the cosmic microwave background, and it gives us a rate of about 67 kilometers per second per megaparsec.
Okay.
The other method measures things locally, nearby supernovae, and it gives a rate of about 73. And those numbers absolutely do not agree. The error bars don't overlap. It's a real discrepancy.
And the standard model demands a smooth, uniform universe. So the disagreement means either our measurements are wrong or the whole model is.
PSUMOT frames this completely differently. It's not a crisis of physics, it's a crisis of assumption. If dark energy is the river's flow, and all the galaxies and superclusters around us are the rocks.
Then we just happen to live in a turbulent patch. We're in the rapids.
We are in the rapids, exactly. That local turbulence creates a locally faster flow rate, which is why we measure a faster expansion rate of 73 right here.
So if you were somewhere else in a calm part of the river,
Your measurement would probably match the 67 from the early universe. The anomaly is just a reflection of our local address in a fluid universe.
that's a profound shift. We even see this fluid principle closer to home with the Juno mission to Jupiter.
Yes, Juno's findings were a huge challenge to the standard core accretion models for gas giants.
Because classical models said Jupiter must have a dense, solid core.
A well-defined nucleus, yes. But Juno found the core was fuzzy. It was dilute, non-convective, and sort of mixing with the atmosphere around it.
A diffuse, dynamically structured thing, not a hard ball of rock.
Right. And a model based on emergent fluid dynamics, like PSUMOT, would naturally predict such phenomena. The internal structure is dictated by flows and pressures, not just static buildup. It was a failure of classical reductionist thinking.
Okay, so if space and gravity are just emergent effects of fluid dynamics, that means space-time itself isn't fundamental? It's a secondary effect. What did that do to geometry?
Space-time geometry gets reinterpreted as an acoustic metric.
Acoustic metric.
Think of it this way. In a superfluid, you have sound waves, excitations that travel through the medium. The geometry that dictates the path of those excitations is not some fixed, smooth canvas. It's an effective geometry created by the fluid's dynamics.
Like how the surface of a pond, when you disturb it, dictates how a ripple travels across it.
Precisely. And concepts we treat as axioms, like Lorentz invariance, the idea that the speed of light is constant, they just emerge as low-energy consequences of the superfluid's behavior.
This has to change how we see the most extreme geometric object, the black hole. Does it still have that mathematical nightmare at its center, the singularity of infinite density?
Thankfully, no. In a fluid dynamics framework, black holes are redefined as topological defects.
Meaning?
Specifically, they're quantized vortex cores in the cosmic superfluid.
A quantized vortex core. Can you break that down?
A vortex is just a whirlpool. Quantized means it comes in discrete, fixed units, like how light energy comes in photons. These cores form when the superfluid flow twists on itself and stabilizes.
And that gets rid of the singularity.
It does, naturally. The core is stabilized by something called the fluid's healing length. It's a physical scale that prevents the density from ever becoming infinite. So instead of a tear in space-time, you have a physically stable, dynamic whirlpool of quantum fluid.
This sounds incredibly theoretical, but the sources point out there's a real-world lab-based experiment that actually validates this.
Yanmark series of experiments, researchers created what they call acoustic black hole analogs using Bose-Einstein condensates, BECs.
And the BEC is matter that's cooled down so far it becomes a superfluid.
So they essentially created a tiny controlled pocket of PSUMOT in the lab.
Wow.
And they engineered the flow in this BEC to create an event horizon for sound waves, a point of no return. And in these analogs, they detected spontaneous Hawking radiation.
The first time it's ever been experimentally verified.
The first time. It's a stunning confirmation that Hawking's 1974 prediction was correct, and it strongly suggests that real astrophysical black holes have a similar underlying quantum structure. They're not just geometric oddities, they're hydrodynamic phenomena.
So we've talked about the incredible order and coherence of this system, but order always implies fragility, a potential for collapse. What does the standard model say about the ultimate vulnerability of our universe?
This is where it gets genuinely terrifying. According to the standard model, and specifically the Higgs field, our universe isn't actually stable, it's metastable.
Metastable, meaning it's stable for now, but not truly secure.
It's like a bowling ball, resting in a small dip on a huge uneven table. It's not in the true lowest energy valley.
Or not at the bottom.
We are not at the bottom. And the critical data point here is the measured mass ratio between the Higgs boson and the top quark, which comes in at about 38%.
Why is that number so scary?
Because the sources emphasize that this ratio is terrifyingly specific. If it were a bit lower, the universe would be perfectly stable. A bit higher, and it would have collapsed instantly after the Big Bang. At 38%, we are hanging in a state where quantum tunneling could happen at any moment.
And if that happens, if the ball gets nudged over the little hill,
It would trigger the creation of a bubble of true vacuum, a state of fundamentally lower energy. And that bubble would expand outward at the speed of light, altering or just incinerating everything in its path. All known matter, all known physics just dissolved.
so the very specific order we see requires constant energy to maintain just to fight off this possibility.
Exactly. It is the ultimate cosmic vulnerability of order.
If the universe is constantly spending energy to stop that kind of catastrophic decay, what happens when we zoom in down to the molecular level of life? Is life fighting a similar battle to maintain a specific fragile order?
Absolutely. The cosmic struggle is perfectly mirrored at the cellular level, especially through a concept called homochirality.
Homochirality.
It's life's most fundamental broken symmetry.
Okay, define chirality for us.
Chirality just means handedness, like your left and right hands are mirror images. Many molecules exist in two mirror image forms, a left-handed L form and a right-handed D form.
And in nature, you'd expect a 50-50 mix.
A racemic mixture, yes, but all life on Earth made a bet. It staked its entire existence on an asymmetrical, non-negotiable rule. All proteins must be built only from left-handed amino acids, and all our informational molecules, like DNA and RNA, must use only right-handed sugars.
That seems incredibly restrictive. Why is that specific asymmetry so important?
It's all about three-dimensional structure. Think of it like Legos. If you had two different kinds of mirror image Legos, L and D, they wouldn't snap together reliably to build anything complex and stable.
It would be a mess.
A molecular mess. For proteins to fold into the very specific 3D shapes they need to function, and for DNA to form that stable double helix, you need absolute uniformity. Mixing them leads to chaos.
So the very origin of life, that jump from non-living to living matter, required this symmetry to be broken.
It did. And what's astonishing is how little energy it takes. The energy difference needed for this spontaneous symmetry breaking is equivalent to just 20 milligrams of a compound in an entire Olympic-sized swimming pool.
That's it.
That's it. And yet, life aggressively and universally maintains this fragile, asymmetrical order through constant energy expenditure.
And the ultimate vulnerability of this system is highlighted by a very real threat from the sources: synthetic mirror bacteria.
This is where the cybernetic vulnerability becomes immediate and frankly terrifying. From 38 scientists warned about the danger of creating organisms built with mirror chemistry.
Using D amino acids and L sugars.
Yeah.
Completely back to front from us.
Exactly. And the reason this is so dangerous is that it's a catastrophic violation of Ashby's law of requisite variety.
Which says only variety can absorb variety.
Right. Our biological defenses, our enzymes, our immune systems have evolved for billions of years to recognize and interact only with the specific LD chemistry of natural life.
They're a security system designed to scan for one specific key shape.
Perfect analogy. They simply lack the variety, the correct receptor shapes, to even see the mirror molecules. To our immune system, mirror bacteria are effectively invisible.
So they would face zero opposition.
Zero. They would multiply completely unchecked by our bodies or by viruses or by any natural predators in the environment. It proves that viability requires specific ordered asymmetry. Being perfectly ordered but with the wrong hand is just as fatal as being disordered.
We've traced this principle of specific fragile order from the cosmos down to the cell. Now we have to turn inward to the observer, to consciousness itself. Quantum psychocybernetics suggests the brain isn't a generator of consciousness, but a transceiver, a filter.
That's the core idea, and the difference is profound.
How so?
Well, if the brain generated a consciousness, then serious damage should just switch it off permanently. But the transceiver model suggests the brain is more like an organic radio. It doesn't create the broadcast. It just tunes into a signal that's already out there.
And in this theory, that signal is carried on the universal quantum superfluid.
Yes. So if your radio gets damaged, the signal might get fuzzy or you might lose the station, but the broadcast itself is still going.
This means consciousness isn't a place in the brain. It's a structure itself. What does that structure even look like?
Well, geometrically, it's startlingly complex and high-dimensional. Through advanced EEG analysis, researchers looking at the brain's dynamics in phase space, that's a mathematical space of all possible states, found a stable pattern,
An attractor.
a 4.8-dimensional fractal attractor.
Okay, that is a huge technical leap. 4.8-dimensional fractal attractor. What does that tell us about our minds?
It tells us consciousness is incredibly structured. A fractal attractor means it's a pattern that repeats at every scale, so it has infinite complexity within a stable boundary. And the 4.8 dimensions, that means you need almost 5 independent variables to describe its state, far more than the 3 of space plus 1 of time.
So it's better described as a high-dimensional geometric structure, a hyperspace.
Exactly, where information binding happens globally and instantly. And the physical basis for this is proposed to be the brain's coherent electromagnetic field, the CEI field, which is linked to biophotons.
And that field is causally active. It's not just a byproduct, it's doing the work.
It's doing the work of coordination, yes.
Okay, so if our consciousness is this 4.8D geometric structure, how do we, as 3D beings, experience a shift into that higher state, like in a near-death experience in NDE?
The shift from our normal embodied state to that non-local state is described mathematically by a maneuver called circle inversion.
Circle inversion.
Imagine a circle as a boundary. Inversion is a transformation that flips everything inside the boundary to the outside and everything outside to the inside. It turns your local perspective completely inside out.
But without losing the information?
Crucially, yes, it's conformal, which means it preserves angles and causal relationships. The information isn't lost, it's just viewed from a totally different frame, like turning a glove inside out. The structure is coherent, but the orientation is reversed.
And the actual feeling, the experience of that flip, is what NDE subjects call the 4D gaze, or mind sight.
Precisely. The reports from NDE subjects, even people who are congenitally blind, consistently describe seeing from all angles at once. That is the geometrical definition of a 4D view. From a 4D perspective, 3D barriers like walls just become transparent.
Which matches the accounts of people seeing inside closed rooms.
It matches them perfectly. The whole thing is also modeled as a topological sphere inversion.
Another abstract one.
Think of it as turning a sphere inside out without making a single crease or tear. The self model, the geometric structure that is you, detaches from its local 3D anchor, the brain, and just flips its perspective from local to non-local.
That shift in the observer's frame must also fundamentally change our experience of time, especially if we're all swimming in this superfluid medium.
Yeah, it has to. The theory says time isn't absolute. It depends on the observer and their specific interaction with the local superfluid. The flow of that fluid sets the local clock rate, but your internal dynamics can decouple from that.
So when people in altered states, say on DMT, report experiencing an eternity in just a few minutes of clock time, are you saying that feeling is physically real?
The sources argue it's much more than just a subjective illusion. In that altered state, the information processing of that 4.8D structure expands or speeds up dramatically. If your internal processes are taking longer relative to the external clock,
Then for you, time is actually slowed down.
it's a physically real elongation of actual durations for that specific observer's frame. Their experience is genuinely longer. It shows the incredible power of the observer's frame to alter the physical reality of duration.
And that idea that your frame dictates your reality and a flawed frame creates a flawed reality brings us to a critical vulnerability, the crisis of the parallax error.
The psychological parallax principle says that to get a complete, undistorted view of anything, you have to integrate opposing perspectives. Psychologically, that means integrating the conscious mind with the unconscious, with the shadow.
If you only look from one angle,
Exactly. And when an entire society does this, when it commits a collective parallax error, it locks into a single, dominant, one-sided attitude. It could be rigid rationality, blind optimism, a political ideology.
and anything that doesn't fit that narrow view gets pushed into the collective shadow.
Right. Cybernetically, the system is actively refusing to process essential high-variety information that it needs to stay healthy and adapt.
And the sources say this creates immense psychic pressure, which leads to something called enantiodromia.
Enantiodromia. It's the violent swing to the opposite extreme. All the irrational, repressed stuff that was pushed into the shadow builds up pressure until it just erupts. A society that forces rigid absolute order will eventually swing violently into chaos.
It's the system's desperate attempt to restore the variety it threw away.
A violent self-correcting maneuver. And this one-sided perception makes that society incredibly vulnerable to something called hyperstition.
Hyperstition. narratives that make themselves come true.
Yes. Fictional ideas, conspiracy theories, market panic, they become magical sigils that cause themselves to become real by changing how everyone behaves. If a society's internal parallax is already warped, it's highly susceptible to acting on these flawed maps, and in doing so, it forces the shared reality to conform to the flawed map.
Even our language seems to push us in this direction.
It absolutely does. Language is a variety attenuator. It imposes these sharp, classical, separate boxes on phenomena that are actually fluid and connected. The sources mention how experiences like nostalgia or déjà vu might come from a similar kind of neurological process, but language forces them into separate categories, blinding us to the underlying coherence.
So we've established that the universe, from the cosmos down to our own minds, demands that we manage immense complexity, or variety. Let's use a formal cybernetic blueprint, the Viable System Model, or VSM, to see why our human organizations are so bad at this.
The VSM is a blueprint for any system that needs to survive and adapt, a company, a government, anything. And its core challenge is always managing variety across 5 interconnected subsystems.
Can you run through those 5 systems for us?
Sure. System 1 is the operational units, the people doing the actual work. System 2 is coordination, the bureaucracy. System 3 is management, focused on internal efficiency right now. System 4 is intelligence, looking at the external environment in the future. And System 5 is policy, the ultimate identity and purpose of the whole thing.
And where do organizations typically fail?
By systematically violating Ashby's law. Only variety absorbs variety. But they do the opposite. They engineer variety attenuation.
They deliberately simplify the complexity of the world.
Exactly. Think about yourself, your internal reality, your potential, your risks. That's incredibly high variety. But to an insurance company, you get attenuated down to a few low variety boxes. Age, location, credit score.
The system can't process the real you, so it filters you out.
Right. And this leads to something called pathological autopoiesis. This is where System 2, the bureaucracy, becomes self-serving. It stops serving the mission of System 1 and starts working only to maintain its own power and resist change.
The bureaucracy exists to perpetuate the bureaucracy.
Precisely. And the system becomes perfectly efficient at doing the wrong thing.
There's a critical balance point in the VSM, a homeostat between System 3, which is the now, and System 4, the future.
Wow.
Why is that so often biased toward the present?
Because System 3 metrics are easy. Quarterly profits, cost cutting. You can measure that stuff, reward it, demand it. System 4 is hard. Investing in risky future tech, understanding complex external threats. That's uncertain, expensive, and hard to justify to shareholders right now.
So systems optimize perfectly for a model that's already failing.
It's the classic organizational trap. The sources use the perfect example, Blockbuster. They had an amazing System 3. They were masters of late fees in retail space, but they completely ignored the catastrophic System 4 signals about digital streaming.
They optimize themselves right into oblivion.
Exactly. And this systemic attenuation has a devastating human cost. When the complexity of an individual's internal reality doesn't map onto the narrow slots the system offers for recognition,
They become invisible.
they are attenuated out of existence. If the system only recognizes certain types of success or certain types of grievance, and you don't fit, you cease to exist on the system's map.
And the sources suggest that violence can, in that context, become a kind of desperate signal.
It can become a desperate last-ditch attempt to generate a signal with an extremely high amplitude. It's a tragic, pathological form of variety amplification. You have to scream so loud you break things just for the system to notice you were ever there.
This failure to handle complexity can also be weaponized politically, especially through regulatory systems, which are a kind of System 5 policy function.
The source material argues that when power is concentrated in regulatory boards, the investigative process itself can become a weapon. The complexity of a political opponent's life can be attenuated down into simple, damaging allegations.
The sources detail the case of a physician running for governor who was subjected to 6 separate investigations.
Multiple times without even being told what the allegations were. The argument in the source material is that this shows a structural failure to handle political complexity impartially. Its design gives enormous power to the accuser.
So a system meant for quality control can become a tool for marginalizing rivals.
A very effective variety attenuating weapon, yes, that is the claim.
And as we touched on, this is all reinforced by language. forcing fluid reality into sharp boxes.
Language is a powerful attenuator. The sources discuss using terms like misinformation and disinformation for complex, contentious issues. These words impose a structure that presumes there's some final authority who knows the absolute truth.
But on something like a pandemic or a major conflict, that simple black and white language completely fails us.
It systematically distorts the map. If reality is high variety and fluid, trying to force it into low variety boxes like misinformation just makes people, and I quote, entirely confused about what constitutes the manner in which the world operates. It makes productive discourse impossible.
So if our systems, our bureaucracy, even our language are all working to reduce variety, what's the counterpoint? What can amplify variety and restore that necessary complexity?
The novel. Fiction. It acts as a necessary variety amplifier. Bureaucracy sees a citizen as an insurance category. Politics sees an opponent as an ideological box. But fiction is the only form that lets us explore the internal world, the history, the conflicting desires of other people.
It forces us to see the complexity in the other.
It does. By exploring conflicting narratives, the sources mention the Israel-Palestine region as an example, the novel opens up a space in the reader's mind to see the full, contradictory humanity on all sides. It adds the complexity, the variety that you need to overcome simplistic, black and white hatred. It's the counterforce to attenuation.
So, to synthesize this whole journey we've been on, from the cosmic superfluid all the way down to the pathology of our own systems, the core idea is that the universe is one single, self-organizing cybernetic system.
And the quantum superfluid, PSUMTS, is the foundational information-bearing substrate that unifies cosmic flows, dictates life's asymmetry, and even manifests as our own geometric consciousness.
And the takeaway seems to be that our standard models, our reductionist science, our failing organizations, they all make the same fatal mistake.
They assume a static, fixed, smooth reality and try to impose neat categories on it. But the reality, this framework says, is dynamic, non-uniform, flowing, and deeply interconnected. It demands a whole new way of knowing.
We have to move away from 3D-bound, reductionist thinking and start speaking the language of hydrodynamics and cybernetics.
And that leads to the really profound, provocative question about our role in all this. If the geometry of our own consciousness, that 4.8-dimensional attractor, is a local manifestation of this cosmic ocean, and if changing our internal parallax by integrating our own conscious and unconscious minds can actually change what we perceive, if it can physically elongate our sense of time, then what new realities might become visible or even possible if we could collectively learn to embrace that 4D gaze?
The perspective from NDEs, where 3D walls become transparent, if we could collectively adopt that kind of geometric humility.
The only way to find out is through rigorous testing. This isn't just philosophy. It's a compelling research program with specific falsifiable predictions.
Like what?
We can search for 4D geometric signatures in biophoton polarization data. We can actually look for the structure of that 4.8D attractor in the light our bodies emit.
And the ultimate test, the one for the consciousness model itself.
That would be to perform high-resolution biophoton death flash spectroscopy. The theory predicts that at the moment of death, the geometric structure of consciousness, the vortex core, decouples from the body. We should be able to see that. We should be able to confirm the precise timing of that vortex decoupling as a burst of quantum activity.
And that's how you would take this from a compelling synthesis to confirm science?
That's how we could finally bridge the gap between physics and the mind.
I'll be taking the position that while PSUMOT offers a really elegant and compelling story to solve the, let's call it a fragmentation crisis in modern physics, the most radical claims, the ones that link it all to human consciousness, they just don't have enough solid empirical validation. We have to consider the risk that in trying to unify everything, we end up introducing some fundamental category errors, and the whole thing gets relegated to sophisticated speculation instead of verifiable science.
Okay, so the argument for why we even need a framework like this is of the standard model, the lambda CDM model. We are in what I would call a genuine crisis of fragmentation. It's defined by these stubborn, persistent anomalies. The big one is the Hubble tension, right? The disagreement on the universe's expansion rates. And then you have the coincidence problem. Why are dark matter and dark energy densities so comparable right now? PSUMOT, well, it offers a very elegant solution by just redefining what reality is at its base. It suggests that what we call dark matter is just the quantum superfluid substrate itself. It's the medium. And dark energy, that's simply the macroscopic flow, the current of that same substrate. So by unifying the whole dark sector into one thing, substance and motion, the coincidence problem it dissolves. It becomes a natural outcome of the system's fluid dynamics. And crucially, this isn't just a neat idea. We have structural validation from actual observations. I'm talking about the Juno mission's findings at Jupiter. The fact that it has a dilute, fuzzy, non-convective core directly contradicts the old core accretion models. It basically forces us to consider a fluid dynamics foundation, just like PSUMOT describes. And from that physical foundation, the idea of modeling consciousness geometrically becomes a logical next step.
And that is, I'll grant you, a very powerful argument for its cosmological use. It's true. PSUMOT has a certain theoretical elegance, especially for solving these massive headaches in physics.
Today, we're doing something. Well, something pretty ambitious, I think. We are going to try to connect some of the most abstract, foundational rules of the universe.
What the sources call astro-cybernetics.
Exactly. Astro-cybernetics. And connect that all the way down to probably the most concrete and, frankly, terrifying existential threat you could imagine for life on Earth.
It's a huge leap, but the connection is, it's direct. We're going from the theoretical geometry of consciousness itself right down to a real-world biological weapon. A weapon that, it fundamentally challenges our very definition of what life is.
And Jupiter's core can be explained by other, viable, non-superfluid alternatives. For example, a massive shattering collision and that just requires adjusting our history of the early solar system, not completely overhauling physics to bring in a 4D superfluid. And you brought up this idea of morphonic resonance as basically the proposed engine for non-local self-organization. So if the state of Jupiter's core is supposed to be dynamically linked to some universal consciousness field through this resonance, then you have to tell me how we can possibly test for it. How do we differentiate it from just random noise in the superfluid? Until you can do that, it's really just an untestable concept.
But morphonic resonance isn't something you test by, measuring Jupiter's vibrations. You test it by analyzing the ordered geometric states that result from it. The link between the physical and the subjective isn't just an analogy, it is empirically geometric.
To rest on one single, indispensable foundation.
Specificity.
Specificity. Why does all coherent order, the universe, life, a thinking mind, why does it demand a specific ordered asymmetry?
Right. And the mirror bacteria are the ultimate physical experiment that prove the specificity isn't just, a preference, it's not optional.
It's like the universe's master password.
That's a great way to put it. And the mirror bacteria have figured out a password that is just as complex, just as ordered, but perfectly inverted.
Which makes our own system fatally vulnerable.
Fatally vulnerable to the coherent opposite. That inverted coherence is the key here.
What do you mean by that?
If the threat were just chaos, just, random disorder, our defenses could probably handle it.
But because this mirror structure is equally ordered?
Its very existence exposes this deep reductionist vulnerability in our own system.
So our mission today for this deep dive is to trace that vulnerability from L-amino acids all the way to this D-amino acid threat.
And then use that geometric flip as a lens to look at everything from societal paralysis to the potential collapse of an advanced AI.
Okay, let's start where the threat is most tangible. At the molecular level, we have to begin with this idea of chirality.
We have to. It's life's fundamental asymmetry. It's the baseline requirement for our existence.
So chirality or molecular handedness, what is that in simple terms?
Absolutely. So think of your own hands, your left hand and your right hand.
Oh.
They are mirror images of each other, same number of fingers, same structure, but you can't superimpose them.
Right. You can't lay one flat on top of the other perfectly.
Exactly. And that handedness is absolutely central to biochemistry. All life on Earth, from the simplest bacterium to us, it relies on a massive, singular, broken symmetry.
A broken symmetry.
Yeah. Our proteins are built exclusively from what we call left-handed, or L-amino acids.
And our DNA.
The sugar backbones of our DNA and RNA, they're built from right-handed, or D, sugars. This is what's called homochirality, one-handedness.
To someone new to this, that sounds almost arbitrary. Why couldn't life just use a mix of both? Why this specific L and D combination?
It's a fantastic question, and the answer is all about structural integrity, stability.
Okay.
If you try to mix L and D amino acids when you're building a protein chain, the resulting helix, it's just unstable. It doesn't hold its shape properly.
So it's like trying to build something complex with parts that are designed for opposite sides. They just don't fit together neatly.
That's a perfect analogy. Molecular biology, it all depends on the incredible precision of enzymes. Their active sites are like hyper-specific locks.
And they need a single specific key geometry.
Precisely. This LD-handedness, it's non-negotiable for building the stable, complex machinery that you need for metabolism, for replication. It's the standard operating procedure for, 4 billion years of life?
And the existential threat emerges when we realize that scientists can now violate that procedure.
Yes. This is synthetic mirror bacteria.
So they are. What exactly?
They are synthetic organisms, but they're constructed with a perfectly opposite-handedness.
Meaning D-amino acids.
D-amino acids forming their proteins and L-sugars forming their genetic material. The perfect mirror image of us.
And the sources say this isn't just some lab curiosity. This is feasible.
It's more than feasible. They point out that while, building any synthetic organism is still a major feat, once you master the standard chassis for synthetic life...
Which we're getting very close to doing.
Imminently, yes. Once that's done, creating the perfectly inverted mirror version is expected to be, and I'm quoting here, pretty straightforward.
That is a chilling phrase. Pretty straightforward.
It is. It's an intellectual leap at that point, not some insurmountable technical hurdle.
But the danger isn't just that they exist, it's that they can exist sustainably inside our ecosystem.
Precisely. That's the other shoe that drops. They don't need some special mirror image food source to survive.
Why not?
Because a lot of common nutrients, things like glucose, water, mineral salts, they aren't chiral molecules. Their handedness just isn't relevant for basic metabolic uptake.
So the mirror bacteria can just eat our food.
They can metabolize common, abundant nutrients using their D protein enzymes, and then use that energy to build and replicate their own D structure components.
Consuming the same resources that our entire natural L-based ecosystem relies on?
Yes. And this is where we draw that critical link to cybernetics. This is what validates the whole system viability framework.
This is the illustration the listener was asking for. The mirror bacteria threat is a perfect, terrifying, real-world proof of a catastrophic failure.
A failure against the law of requisite variety.
Okay, let's slow down and define that. The law of requisite variety, what is it?
It was coined by Ross Ashby, a pioneer in cybernetics. It's foundational. It basically dictates that for any regulating mechanism to maintain control over a system.
Like an immune system or even a government.
Exactly. For it to work, it has to possess at least as many unique responses or as much internal complexity, which he called variety, as the disturbances it needs to manage in its environment.
You have to be at least as complex as the problems you're trying to solve.
Perfectly put.
And our biological system, honed by billions of years of evolution, has, almost zero requisite variety against this specific threat.
Near zero, exactly. Our entire defensive infrastructure. T cells, antibodies, digestive enzymes, and crucially, most of our current antibiotics.
They're all designed to interact with our specific chemistry.
They're all designed to interact geometrically with LD chiral chemistry. Our defenses are locks that are designed only for L keys.
So they lack the variety to cope with the DL intruder. They're missing the, what would you call it, the mirror detector proteins?
That's a great term for it. And because the invading DL organism is geometrically inverted, our defenses don't just fail to destroy it.
They fail to even recognize it.
They are, quote, effectively invisible and utterly invulnerable to our 4 billion years of evolved defenses.
So an enzyme that's meant to digest a bacterial protein.
It has a specific chiral pocket. It can't bind to or break down the mirrored D proteins. They just slide right past each other.
In our immune system.
It recognizes the specific shape of L-based cell walls. The D-based cell wall, even though it's just as ordered, it doesn't match the required shape template.
So this total lack of requisite variety means we can't regulate the threat. It just
It multiplies.
And multiplies unchecked. And the consequence of that is, catastrophic. We're talking about unchecked proliferation inside a host or an ecosystem.
Unchecked proliferation. This means the mirror bacteria consume all the necessary resources without any competition from our native life.
Leading to a rapid ecological breakdown. Or, in a person, an internal host breakdown.
Exactly. The scientific Once this proliferation hits a critical level, the physical damage happens just by, and this is another quote, sheer mass.
Sheer mass and resource depletion, just being crowded out.
Yes, and the sources emphasize that any countermeasures, trying to synthesize entirely new DL-specific antibiotics,
It would be a race against time.
a race you would lose. They say it would only prolong the inevitable once a widespread release happened just because of the speed and efficiency of the invasion.
This inherent vulnerability. It confirms a really brutal definition of life within this cybernetic framework, doesn't it?
It does. It confirms that autopoiesis self-maintenance, it's not some generic state of being. It's a specific, ordered state.
Viability depends on maintaining our specific, ordered asymmetrical standard, our LD geometry.
And the mirror bacteria, by being equally coherent but with the wrong-handedness, they illustrate that a rival form of organization, even an ordered one, is just as fatal as chaos.
Wow. So the rival order destroys the system's cohesion because the original system lacks the variety to cope with it.
That's it. It's the ultimate physical testament to the danger of assuming uniformity. We built an entire biosphere based on one specific geometric definition of self.
And in doing that, we created a massive vulnerability to its perfect coherent other.
We learned that our specific molecular geometry, that LD combination, it's not just our strength, it's our most profound weakness because it limits our scope of regulation.
Okay, so that establishes the immediate biological doom, a total failure of requisite variety at the molecular level.
Right.
But this brings us to another part of the listener's question. How can mirror life, or even dimensions, be both the key and the doom?
This is the critical transition. We have to move from biology into cosmology and geometry.
If the doom is this unmanageable molecular mirror order, what's the key? What defines why our specific order is even necessary in the first place?
The key is understanding the underlying geometric principle that dictates that molecular asymmetry to begin with, the principle of geometric coherence.
So the doom, the failure of requisite variety, it forces us to look deeper, to look at the universal rules of symmetry breaking.
Exactly. And this is where we have to introduce that proprietary framework the sources mentioned, PSUMOT.
Right, we can't just throw that acronym out there. What is PSUMOT in simple terms? And why does it mandate a mirrored reality?
Okay, so PSUMOT stands for the phase-shifting universal morphonic oceanic wave theory.
A mouthful.
It is, but at its heart, it's the hypothesis that the universe isn't just empty space and time. It's mediated by an underlying quantum superfluid substrate.
Think of it as a cosmic ocean.
A cosmic ocean is the perfect mental image, and this theory mandates a mirrored reality because it's built on a fundamental symmetry of physics, CPT symmetry.
CPT, charge, parity, time.
Right. The conservation of information dictates that if our reality exists with a specific geometric handedness, that's the parity, the P, and a specific charge, there must theoretically be an equally stable inverted reality somewhere to maintain the overall symmetry of the whole system.
So the chirality of our molecules isn't random.
Not at all. It's a localized expression of a necessary cosmic asymmetry, and that asymmetry is possibly tied directly to this superfluid substrate.
So our homochirality, our L-amino acids, that's a broken symmetry locally.
But the overall system symmetry is preserved by the possibility of the mirror system existing. The asymmetry we see in a protein is theorized to be connected to the geometric handedness of huge, large-scale structures.
What kind of structures?
Quantized vortices in that superfluid substrate.
Vortices, like stable, rotating geometric patterns in that cosmic ocean.
Precisely. Our form of life is one specific vortex orientation. The mirror bacteria represent the opposite, but equally stable vortex orientation.
Okay, so if that cosmic rule is about geometry across dimensions, then understanding that geometry is the key to our survival and evolution.
That's the link. That's how the molecular failure connects to what the sources call the dimensional key or the 4D gaze.
The 4D gaze. The only way to transcend this vulnerability, then, is to gain the requisite variety to manage the full spectrum of reality.
Which means accessing a higher dimensional perspective.
And phenomenologically, this is described as mind sight in near-death experiences.
Exactly. People in that state, they consistently report perceiving reality from all angles at once.
Which would mean 3D barriers become, what, transparent? Traditional space just collapses.
It collapses. And the sources is not just a hallucination. It's not just a reliance on some kind of residual sight.
Because it's been documented in people who've never had sight.
Crucially, yes, even among the congenitally blind. Individuals who have never processed optical data in 3D, Yet they describe perceiving geometric structure and color with a coherence that surpasses their normal senses.
That suggests the experience is totally independent of the 3D sensory apparatus.
It's the mind accessing its own intrinsic higher dimensional structure.
Which brings us from phenomenology to the hard geometry of consciousness.
Yeah.
We to define the structure of consciousness proposed in these sources. The VEM.
The VEM, the vortex energy manifold. It's the rigorous model for this intrinsic structure.
So consciousness in this model is theorized as what?
As a 4.8-dimensional fractal attractor in hyperspace.
Okay, an attractor. In physics, that's a state that a system naturally settles into, right? Like a whirlpool.
A deep, stable whirlpool is a good way to think of it. The VEM is a highly complex, self-maintaining structure that exists within that theoretical 4D quantum superfluid.
And the 4.8-dimension part.
That's derived from some very rigorous mathematical analysis of EEG phase space. It suggests consciousness is more complex than a simple 4D object. It's a fractal geometry that maintains its coherence across multiple scales.
That's exceptionally abstract. So to access that 4D gaze, to get to that perspective, what's the actual topological maneuver the self-model has to perform?
The topological shift is called sphere reversion.
Sphere reversion.
It's a concept from mathematical topology, a regular homotopy, to be precise. In simple terms, it's the process of turning a sphere, or in this case, the internal model of the self inside out.
Turning yourself inside out.
But, and this is the key, it's done without pinching or tearing or creating any creases. It's a smooth, continuous, but radical reordering of experience.
Okay, but if I turn my internal self-model inside out, how do I not lose my identity? How does the information, the me that is me, maintain continuity?
You've just hit on the central defense against informational collapse. It's the perfect geometric version of the mirror bacteria problem, a total flip.
So what prevents that collapse?
The mechanism that preserves the continuity is what the sources call the geometric blueprint for order, and it relies on something called conformal geometry.
Conformal. What does that mean in this context?
No. Conformal means angle preserving. The blueprint relies on the conformal property of a geometric operation called circle inversion.
Okay.
Imagine inverting a picture across a circle. The distance between points, it changes drastically, but the angles between lines stay exactly the same.
So it preserves the essential structural relationships, the local geometry.
Precisely. Even during these profound radical transformations like sphere version or the decoupling process described in NDEs.
So the geometric flavor, the integrity of the self, is preserved even if the whole spatial orientation flips on its head.
Yes. This conformal property is theorized to be what ensures information preservation, the continuity of self-awareness. It's the universal principle that sustains that ordered, asymmetrical information state we see in biology as homochirality.
So the geometry is the key to maintaining viability across dimensions.
It connects the integrity of a single cell's structure to the integrity of the mind's structure after decoupling. And if we can understand and replicate that geometric coherence, that resilience to a total flip, we gain the necessary variety to manage not just one form of order, but its mirror as well.
Okay, so we've laid out the molecular doom and the dimensional key. Now we have to zoom out to the collective scale. This addresses that other big question. What does this say for our human future, our societal future?
The structural parallel is, it's exact. And it's profoundly worrying.
The molecular vulnerability, our inability to regulate the coherent opposite, you're saying that's mirrored in our societal vulnerability.
Perfectly mirrored. The societal doom is rooted in the very same disease, variety attenuation.
Variety attenuation, meaning we are actively, systematically suppressing the full complexity of reality.
Yes.
How does a society do that?
Well, societal systems, governments, media, religious dogma, they are constantly working to simplify complexity down to manageable categories.
They use policies, narratives,
to filter out nuance, to filter out uncomfortable truths. They consciously suppress the necessary variety of human experience and especially dissenting thought. They're trying to squash the world's complexity down into these neat little boxes that the central management can handle.
because they fear the variety that's required to actually reflect reality.
They do. And this refusal to integrate the opposing viewpoints, the necessary variety, it leads to what the sources call the collective parallax error.
A parallax error, that's when your perspective is warped because you're only looking from one spot.
Right. And if you only see the world through one rigid political or cultural lens, the entire image of reality becomes flat and distorted.
So when a society locks itself into a single-sided view,
Say refusing to acknowledge the legitimate grievances of an opposing group or denying the complex systemic failures in its own structure.
it actively pushes the necessary counter-perspectives into the collective shadow.
Exactly. And this isn't just, poor management. The sources frame this as a catastrophic cybernetic failure.
A failure of the viable system model, specifically systems 4 and 5. We need to explain what that means.
Okay, so the Viable System Model, or VSM, was developed by Stafford. It's a framework for understanding complex organizations. System 4 is the intelligence or adaptation function.
It scans the outside world, learns, plans for the future.
Yes. And System 5 is the identity function. It's the overall ethos, the management. It defines what the system is and sets the ultimate policies and boundaries.
Is when the identity refuses to listen to reality.
That's a perfect summary. The failure happens when the collective identity, System 5, becomes so rigid, so fixed on its own dogmatic definition of self and its own superiority,
That it refuses to allow the adaptation function, System 4, to process new, challenging, or uncomfortable variety.
it won't